So the topic of my talk today will be on happiness. I'm sure this is something that everyone deeply cares about, and is probably something that we can't find enough of in our lives. So what is true happiness? Where does it come from? And what can I do in my life to get more of it? I think these are all very relevant questions to ask. When people usually talk about meaning of life, you get an array of answers. For some people, the meaning of life might be to find the perfect partner, the perfect career, building a vast fortune perhaps, building friendships. For other people, the meaning of life might be to contribute to the world in some way, to make it a better place, living in the service of others, living for something that's larger than yourself. I think we can all agree that the more selfless the aim, the more we generally accept it to be a worthier goal. But if you look at what all these different things aim to achieve, whether it's for yourself or for other people, it's this basic aspiration for happiness that drives our meaning in life. We all want to obtain lasting happiness and to avoid unhappiness. It's a universal goal that we have, and it's a basic constant in all our lives. Even the animals and the beings from the other realms, they also are looking for happiness. They also look for meaning in life and try their best to avoid suffering and pain. So all beings in samsara, we're all looking for the same thing, that one elusive thing that we call happiness. But how many of us are actually able to find it? How many of us can find true happiness? Most people, in their search for pleasures and happiness, end up looking in the wrong places. And they look for sensual gratification, and many of them actually only intensify their suffering. Many young people, for example, they think that happiness is emotional excitement and euphoria, and so they experiment with things like sex and drugs, and they don't realize that that leads to problems with obsession and addiction, which makes them even more vulnerable to suffering. For other people, material wealth might be the prerequisite for a happy life, and so they spend their entire lives working hard for it. But when it comes, they find that it doesn't provide them with the fulfillment they had expected. Instead, they start to worry over it. They worry about protecting their wealth, and they become suspicious when people get too close to them. I think when people often become rich and famous, what happens is your friends and your relatives, they try to find all sorts of reasons to be owed money. So we have to deal with those problems when we become wealthy, and there's often this feeling of emptiness after you are able to obtain the wealth. And so how do we tackle this elusive problem of pursuing happiness? So Buddhism provides some insight here on happiness. Buddhism asks us to investigate what we really think to be happiness. Observe your experience and investigate, look into the true nature of it. Don't just blindly accept what society or those around you deem as happiness. The Buddha warned us not to fall into the trap of adopting the herd mentality and following blindly whatever the accepted notions of happiness are in our society. We should not be like sheep in a flock, all blindly following each other down the cliff of ignorance. But we should really question what the established notions of things are, and we should investigate its true nature. It is the process of questioning and probing that leads to real happiness. And the Buddha went through this process himself 2,600 years ago when he abandoned the worldly life in search of a solution to this problem of life and death. And when he became enlightened, he realized the Four Noble Truths, that life is characterized by suffering, that the cause for our suffering is due to our craving and selfish desires, that there can be an end to all of this suffering, and that there exists a path that can lead us to true and lasting happiness. So what the Buddha discovered was that what most people regard as happiness is actually suffering. And what they take to be suffering is actually happiness. Most people think that happiness is derived from the satisfaction of your senses. They think that the more pleasures you experience through the senses of sight, sound, smell, taste, and touch, that the happier you are. But we know that pleasure arising from the senses is only short-lived in nature, and it doesn't last. It's very impermanent. It is also inherently unstable and always subject to change. In fact, it's because of its changeability that pleasure can easily turn into its polar opposite of suffering at any time. So when our goal begins to seek sense gratification, our mind turns outward toward all these external sense objects, and we begin to crave for these pleasurable sensations. When they are present, we feel temporarily satisfied, but as soon as they are absent, we begin to feel unfulfilled and uncomfortable again. Pleasurable sensations are also insatiable. The more we have, the more we want, and the better we want it. It's very much like a leaking water vessel. No matter how much water you put into it, you can't seem to get enough. And there's always this feeling of emptiness that can never be filled. As soon as a pleasurable sensation has ended, you try to fill it in with another one, but all that does is just reinforce its illusion of happiness. So it's very much like an example of plastering over a crack in the wall, thinking that by doing that you can fix the crack. What happens is when the plaster dries, the crack reappears again, and you're left with the same problem. So pleasurable sensations, they don't make us any better off. In fact, the Buddha said that the craving for it is what leads to our chronic suffering. So if pleasurable sensations don't lead to our happiness, and if it can't be found in the outside world, which is all subject to conditions and impermanence, then where can it be found? Well, the problem with us is that because of all the conditioning we've been subjected to in our present life and in previous lives, we think that happiness is something that needs to be found outside of ourselves, in things like wealth, status, romantic love, friendship, achievement, and so forth. We're continually running after all these things, thinking that they will bring us happiness. So the analogy I like to use for this is like running on a treadmill. On a treadmill, you can run at whatever pace you set, but regardless of how fast you run, you never get anywhere. In fact, the faster you go, the more quickly you just tire yourself out. So in life, it's really just the same. If you continually run after all these external things in your life, the more pleasure you seek, the more wealth and fortune you try to accumulate, the more achievements you go after, the more you just quickly tire yourself out. And the sad part is, you're getting nowhere in life. So the Buddha taught us that happiness is just one step away. All you need to do is to stop running, step away from the treadmill, and see the beauty and peace that's available in the present moment. You don't need to do any more running. You've been running for far too long, lifetime after lifetime, always looking for more, always chasing after wind. So if we can realize that all we have to do is just step away from that treadmill, then we can begin to see the peace that's available in the present moment for us. And when we make peace with the present moment and be kind to it, then that's when true happiness ensues. So we don't need to look elsewhere. All we need to do is stop. In fact, that's what we mean when we talk about nirvana. Nirvana is just the stopping of all of this movement until we've reached a state of perfect peace, stillness, and happiness. So the critics of this might say it's easy to say all of this, that happiness is only available in the present moment, but how do you actually go about applying this in your life? Well, finding true happiness, like any other skill, like playing the piano or learning a new language, requires consistent practice and training. Training your mind to be mindful of everything that's happening in the present moment. Being aware of when you're stepping back onto that treadmill again. And learning to be here in the present, here and now. We know that external circumstances are beyond our control. We can't change life, but we can certainly change how we look at it. By meditating, we can learn to put away all our worries and to make peace with whatever it is that we're experiencing. When we can do this, we begin to let go, and that's when we begin to find true happiness. This ability to let go, to not get buried in the thoughts of the past or the worries of the future, that's actually something we've all experienced before, to some extent, even if we haven't practiced meditation. So the feeling you get after you achieve a goal, complete a really difficult task, or after an intense workout at the gym, usually that's a feeling of deep calm and relaxation, when all the tension that's been built up in your body is released, and for a very short moment, your mind is completely still and peaceful. So if we could think about how we feel during that short moment, which is in itself dependent on conditions, the deep sense of well-being and flourishing that we felt, then just imagine one who is in complete peace and at one with himself, one who is able to be in the present moment, putting down everything. Imagine how much peace and happiness he would feel. I don't think I can even begin to imagine how much bliss and happiness you would feel at that level. So if you really want true happiness in your life, you must make the conscious effort to put in the training and practice to make your mind happy. Let go of all the attachments to the sense pleasures. Be fully alive to the here and now. I know that many of you realize the value of this, otherwise you wouldn't be coming to our meditation class every Saturday. But if once a week is all the time that you have for meditation, then that is not enough. Just like you can't expect your body to feel comfortable if you bathe or brush your teeth for just once a week. You have to put consistent practice into it in order to realize its benefits. So I hope that everyone can learn to get off their treadmills and start investing in your own happiness. Thank you for listening.